etc. And have sold on, and I recommend you check out their website because the stuff is absolutely beautiful. We're also very pleased to have Matthew Paskin, who's the design director of Whitecroft Lighting. And if you don't know, Whitecroft, we're doing a lot of interesting product development in this area, looking at how can they build in circularity into their light fittings. So we're very pleased to have Matt with us today. We also have John Bullock, my old colleague and friend, who is, apart from being a passionate environmentalist and a man ahead of his time in many ways, he's also the publisher and editor of the Light Review, where he has this conversation continues. And we've also got Nigel Harvey, the CEO of Recolight itself, and no less a passionate environmentalist. So there you go. This is the issues we're going to address today in our webinar. First of all, just to let you know, we are recording the session so that you can go back and look at it and digest it at your leisure. We aim to finish around 1 o'clock because we don't have that long presentations. Today's more discussion. We're initial exploring of the issues of how do we begin to address this issue of luminaires at the end of their life. Now, if you mouse down over your menu bar at the bottom, you've got a couple of functions. I'm sure you're familiar with these, all you Zoom users. You have questions, and don't forget you can pop questions for our panel at any time into the Q&A box. And we'd ask that you use the chat box for everything else. So if you've got any questions about the about sound or about the presentations or any or contact details or something like that, Suzanne is monitoring that, and she'll be able to assist you with any questions, with any sort of comments and queries you have there. As I said, today is our 5th sort of discussion in the conversation. You can see the previous presentations and events. They're all on the Recolight website, so recolight.co.uk. So go there and then just follow the links, and you may have to register, and then you get to see, you can go back and listen to all the presentations. There's a lot of really interesting stuff, a lot of great expertise that people have shared with us this year. So I recommend you take a look at those if you haven't joined us already. I'm just going to do a little roundup and of developments in the industry. And one thing this last week was that LAMP, the Spanish lighting company, their latest sound absorbing range, the Stormbell 80, they've decided to produce that in, using materials that they wouldn't have normally used. So they're using PET felt from old water bottles. They're using recycled cork stoppers from Cava bottles, and they're also using thermoformed hemp for the reflectors, which are 70% hemp and 30% polyester fiber. And they're just and this is what they look like, and they're making quite a marketing play of these. Just a little example. And you have things like this is Mike Stone Lighting. They've got a service where they come out and they repair and fix, bring components out to luminaires in the field, and then you get they can be reconditioned, and they give a 5-year warranty, starts again. So these are the kind of things that are going on, and there seems to be a momentum building with all the, and this is a small thing, but obviously there's lots of companies beginning to address this. How do we keep luminaires in the road? How do we avoid the take it and throw it away culture? Right, I'm now going to invite Chris Miller. They've got a very interesting new program, a new offering called the Full Circle. And Chris, if you'd just like to talk us through what this program is, how it works, and what you guys have been doing, that'd be brilliant.
Thanks, Ray. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to, before I do that, I'm just going to very quickly set some scenes and talk through both the traditional and developing models of consumption, just to put some context into this. Have the next slide, please, Ray. This is the linear approach to consumption, which I think we're all aware of, often referred to as take, make, use, lose. where raw materials are taken, refined, manufactured into product, sold, used, and then ultimately discarded. Next slide, please, Ray. The circular models of consumption, we're probably all, to a lesser or greater extent, aware of as well. This model breaks the link between the used and then discarded, so the user and the landfill. At the end of use, not end of life, but at the end of use, items are either maintained, redistributed, remanufactured, or recycled. However, historically, in the majority of instances, items are just recycled, which isn't a silver bullet solution. Next slide, please, Ray. So at Skinflint, we offer a lifetime guarantee that includes repairs on all our products, but we've just introduced a new scheme where effectively after a year of use, clients, both commercial or private, can trade in their Skinflint lights in exchange for a 50% credit towards a future purchase. Returned lights are then repaired, restored, recertified and placed back into the marketplace. This effectively financially incentivizes the scheme and keeps products constantly in circulation. I just want to, one point before we just show a little animation on how and why this works. It's not just after a year. This could be after 5 years, 10 years, whatever the client chooses.
Okay, let me get the, are we ready for the animation, Chris?
Yep, let's roll with this.
So very exciting.
This is just a 90-second animation which explains why and how we do this.
At Skinflint, we've combined a passion for classic design with a commitment to sustainability to become Europe's leading vintage lighting retailer. All our lights are exclusively high-quality originals, dating between 1920 and 1970, and sourcing them takes us to the most intriguing locations. Once the salvaged items reach our Victorian warehouse, our specialist team gets busy researching each light. This allows us to work out the best way to re-engineer each one, restore it sensitively, and bring it up to modern-day standards. It's called product circularity, and it's better for our future than the make, take, use, lose model that drives overconsumption and climate change. For over a decade, we've been supplying private residences and commercial clients all over the world with an ever-changing and evolving range of lighting, an unrivaled level of service, the story of each item's origin, salvage and restoration, and a lifetime warranty that includes repairs. We also offer our full circle buyback scheme, where after a year of ownership, clients can return lights in exchange for a 50% credit towards a future purchase. Returned items are then restored, certified, and placed back into the market. This is our commitment to sustainability through the circular economy. Come and explore our range of vintage lights. Tell your friends, families, and colleagues. Become a more conscious consumer with Skinflint. Okay, great graphic, Chris. Right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see everybody. So, Chris, this works for the type of luminaires that you make, yeah? How would you see this happening for, you know, modular panel? How would you see this, what you do, you know, going across the industry, really?
Well, I think for the attendees today, we batted this around last week, and John Bullock raised this point that we'd how did you put it, John? That we'd taken the
low-hanging fruit, Chris.
Low-hanging fruit. Whilst I agree with John in many ways with that comment, I think it's quite easy to say that in the benefit of hindsight. We've chosen this road. These products are the ones that we choose to drive, but we all work in different sectors and different markets, and I can't see a reason why this model cannot be rolled out with other companies. I've been really impressed with the work Matt's team are doing at Whitecroft. They've taken the 600 by 600 to a different level, and they're not just looking at now, they're looking at the future, and I think that's the way this needs to go.
Okay, all right. Who wants to come in on this and talk about, you know, yeah, Matt, tell us how is this going to work? How are we going to really deal with luminaires at the end of their life?
Yeah, so perfect. Hi everyone, how you doing? Yeah, thanks for teaming me up there, Chris. I really appreciate that, and I love what you guys are doing too. But yeah, we two things going on, I think, for us. Firstly, we've got retrofit or upcycling. So the first service that we talk about or offer to our customers, typically in healthcare education settings, is we can come to site and look at your existing kit and upcycle it, very much like Chris is doing. Although typically the products don't come back to us. In many ways, they can stay on site. We can do uplifts to gear trays and other elements. So effectively leadifying what they've got, replacing it. We do a full warranty on that. It's almost like installing a new luminaire, and again, pretty straightforward for us. And we're not just doing that now on our own luminaires, we're also doing it on other people's luminaires within the industry. So that's probably the first step, and probably most akin to what Chris is doing there. But also then, if you follow our story, one of the things we've started doing is moving to our new product development. So really thinking differently about when a product does come back to us in 10, 15 years time, it's been designed with what we would call cartridge technology up front. So the ability to really quickly, simply upgrade any of the parts within the product itself. So you can look at it for me in two ways. You can look at what's on site, and we should all be trying to upcycle old projects or old products in situ, but then we can also look at what we put on the market next.
Okay, Matt, in your experience, what happens mostly to luminaires, at end of life today?
I think we all know that, don't we? They all get binned effectively.
When you say all, I mean, you taking, what sort of, do we know what sort of percentage of them get binned?
I don't know. Probably Nigel might be better placed for that. I mean, we as an organisation put around 600,000 luminaires into the market each year. I mean, I have to say, from my experience, we've had pioneers approach us, certainly the BAMs of this world and people like that, who want to upcycle their existing projects. So just to give you a feel for how much we've done 15 of these projects, which I guess is the tip of the iceberg. In reality, there's a lot more out there. We do see certain products come back, more bulkheads than anything else, but no, on the whole, I think most of it is either scrapped or just not utilised at all.
And finally, before I come to you, Nigel, also this issue with Cat A, in a Cat A fit out, we put in recessed modulars, they stay in while the letting agent goes around showing it, etc. Then the client comes in, they want to make it look like a boutique hotel. They take all those fittings out, they end up in a skip. Yep,
absolutely. And that's one of the things, hopefully you team me up there to talk about this product we have just launched. So,
well, I wasn't actually, but I think you're going to anyway.
I'm good. I'm doing it now. We're on it. Yeah. So this is, we've had some great conversations actually with 2 or 3 clients now based in the London area, where they've said to us, look, what you're trying to do here certainly with Cascade Flex and the 600 Square that we discussed is absolutely fantastic, because what we can do is we can buy this luminaire, we can buy it with what is organic response for us, but for others would be wireless controls, and we can track it in use. So effectively we can install level 1 or level 2, don't do the rest of the building. And then these cartridges that we've got, we can track over time. We know their burning hours, we know how long they've been in situ, and then they literally want to take them and either, well, hopefully if the client loves our products, they keep them in situ and they get going. But if they don't like the products and want to do a refit, they then mothball them, they log them, tag them based on the hours they've been in use, and then they can use them again and get them out for the next project. So hopefully we are starting with the new products to address some of these Cat A issues that we've got. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a massive issue that needs to be addressed.
Nigel, have you got any numbers on this? Can you put a sort of context for us?
Yeah, so in the WE system, we don't think of units, we talk in tons. So the 2019 data for the quantity of commercial light fittings sold in the UK is 42,000 tons. So we're talking quite a lot of fittings. That was what was sold in the UK. The tonnage that was actually collected and recycled through the WE system is only 2,700 tons. So about 6.5%. And of those 6.5%, the amount that was actually reused through the system is 0, which is clearly enormously disappointing. So I guess there are 2 gaps there, 2 really big gaps for me. The first is the difference between 42,000 and 2,700. There's a huge quantity of fittings that aren't going through the proper WE system, but are instead probably many of them are being recycled, but they're being recycled as scrap metal. The problem is that the standards that get applied to scrap metal recycling are not the same as those that get applied to WEEE. And what is probably the case, it means that some of the hazardous materials that were previously put in the plastics of luminaires may well not be being properly collected and separated out. And so that's clearly a cause for concern. But even those 2,700 that are being collected and properly treated, it is very sad that we're not yet able to properly recycle, to properly find ways of reusing some of those. They get properly recycled, but looking at opportunities for reuse would be fantastic. It's something I'd love to see come out of this discussion.
So we've an absolute mountain to climb, basically. Bob, give us your from the Society of Light and Lighting's view. What's your view on this issue, and are we beginning to look at it, to address it?
Yes. First, though, I'm going to lay down a challenge. Listening to what Nigel's been saying, we've just got the news. The Arcadia Group has gone into administration. So all of those shopping centre stores, they've all got serried ranks of track spots. If it goes completely under, then they're going to go and pull those track spots out and throw them in the bin. Probably recycled as metal. If they go through the WEEE system, they will get shredded to the lowest common denominator. What we need is the companies who go in there, pick up those track spots, refurbish them, check them over. Maybe it's the companies who sold them. They're going to be cheap. Just make an offer to the administrators. And then why can't we then sell those to our high street independent retailers? We want regeneration in the high street. So they get low cost, high quality fittings, good color temperatures, and we don't throw stuff in the bin. Everybody's happy. The administrator makes some money. So there are things you can do, but to do that, we need to build the platforms, the systems, the companies. There's good people out there doing it, like Seren Lighting, they're getting down and dirty with these fittings, but they turn them into usable fittings. The question of Society of Light and Lighting is there's whole ranges of knowledge. Some people, the White Cross, the Stones, the signifiers of this world are out there working hard. They know how it works. Other people have barely heard of this. So we started writing a fact file. From the fact file, we started writing a checklist, and then Mark Riddler of BDP brilliantly came up, said, why don't you put an assessment method? So we can compare Chris's, Matt's, Signify, or any other, import from the far side of the world, and we have a level playing field. We drive demand by getting specifiers to understand, and we enable the manufacturers. So supply push, demand pull, everybody gets a level playing field of knowledge. And we'll have to keep updating that, because as we're learning on these 5 Recolight seminars, we learn from each other.
Has that been published yet, Bob, your assessment method?
They will be at draft stage in the next couple of weeks. And we're hoping we're going to get the version 1 edition out in first quarter of next year. We're going as fast as we can. There's a lot of learning. We're pleased with how it's going. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. John, you are nodding along enthusiastically.
Like a little nodding dog. Exactly what Bob says there. It's inevitable that at the start of this process, you're going to start at the places that we know. So people like Matt will be saying, okay, well, this is obviously important. What do we do about it? And there are, what should we say, a handful of lighting manufacturers who are getting to grips with the ongoing future for their luminaires. However, and Chris, the whole thing about the low-hanging fruit is that if you're going to do this service, do it with a range of fittings that people would really like to see in their dining rooms, because that's, the market is just gagging for good stuff. So that's when I say low-hanging fruit. There we are. If the market all of a sudden shifts around to track and spots, ex Arcadia, then there will be another obvious marketplace. But the overwhelming issue that we have here is one of scale. Most of the fittings out there, no one really knows where they come from. Nobody knows what went into them. But we have still got the responsibility to say, has that really reached the end of its life? We're talking about acknowledging residual value in a fitting that is then taken out of a ceiling. Now, it might have residual value without doing anything to it. It just needs a certification certificate, tick the box and put it back on the shelves. It might need a new LED engine. It probably will need a new driver. And in some cases, and interesting, you mentioned Seren there, Bob. I was talking to Gethin yesterday. Fantastic story. Actually, just talking to clients, well, what are you trying to do here? Well, we want to improve our lighting. Well, why don't we just use the old stuff and just make it work again? And they're not doing it for a green reason. They're doing it for a very practical economic reason. So things are opening up, new views, new ways of looking at it. We know that it is vitally important, but as I said, and I've said, and I'll keep saying, the people who are going to do this are only just starting to appear. And it is people like Skinflint, and it is people like Seren. It will not be the manufacturers. The manufacturers will deal with the very rare and exotic fruits that are their ranges, and bless them for that. But the rest of us will all be working out of street corner garages, trying to put 24 fittings together that have been pulled out of the local primary school. Sorry, rant over.
No, thank you, John. That's very, very passionate. Claire, could I bring you in here? Could you, first of all, tell us a little bit about the ICEO and its view of the world? And then specifically, maybe address, what happens to a branch of Topshop that gets closed and the spotlights, what should happen there? What does happen? And who makes that happen?
Well, ISA, as you said, is the Industry Council for Electronic Equipment Recycling, but we are equally, if not more, passionate about reuse in the hierarchy of things. So we bring together producers, producer compliance schemes, actual recyclers, those who crush it up, who deal with the scrap metal as well, a whole range of treatment facilities. And we work with government and the regulators to try and improve and increase. I call it recycling, but every time I say recycling, it's reuse and recycling. And this is a very exciting time because at the moment we've got a few legislative drivers, not just here in the UK, but coming from Europe as well, which are actually making us think much, much more about the reuse element of dealing with old electronic equipment as well as the recycling. One of those is the Design Directive, which has been around since 2010, but has been amended over the years. And very recently, some circular economy aspects have been introduced to that: durability, repairability, upgradability. So this is thinking about the future of things that are being made. But we've also got to think about the stuff that's around right now, which may not have been designed to be repairable and upgradable, and what can we do with that? And there, the WE regulations that Nigel was referring to have just been, well, they're not just been, they're in the process of being reviewed. So we're going to have a new set in a couple of years' time. And what government's trying to do is introduce all these circular economy objectives into the regulations. So thinking about reuse, for example, one of the ideas that's being discussed this morning even, was to do with zero VAT on reused or upgraded stuff. Now that could be another economic driver to making people deal with the sorts of things that are in Topshop today. So to answer your second question, what happens to it? I think everybody has touched on this and they're all absolutely right. It will get taken out, it will get put in a skip. And if we have good waste contractors and responsible waste contractors, it will be taken to a recycler. Now that will probably mean a scrap metal dealer, and it will go into, along with other scrap metal, and be crunched up. There'll be a good recovery rate from the metal, very good, because it's economic. The plastics will be landfilled, whatever they have in them. And that may be against other regulations. If, however, we don't have such a good skip operator, it could be going straight to landfill. And at the moment, we don't have any data to show how much of what goes into skips gets recycled and how much is actually landfilled. But we can be pretty clear that none of it is reused.
Okay, and the person doing that, Claire, is that usually the electrical contractor? Is that, or do people get in waste contractors? What happens when on a, say, a store refurb?
waste contractors will be taking that away. The electrical contractors, the building contractors will be getting it as far as the skip, and then whoever you ring. Now, it's very interesting at the moment, there's some work going to be going on to look at the good and the bad contractors who take things away. And an enormous proportion, something like 50%, could actually not be registered waste carriers and actually take the stuff and dump it or do whatever with it. It's not necessarily going to be recycled. At the moment, we just don't know.
I mean, we're all focusing on reuse here, but it's quite a messy business in the real world. You know, you're taking the luminaire out, it may be low value, nobody may want it, it may be damaged on removal, you need to test it again. I mean, Chris, you're doing this in the real world. Are we being wrong by focusing on reuse?
No, not at all. I think reuse is not a. This is very complex. It's not a one size fits all for any solution. If it's reuse or leased products, whatever it may be. I think can I just go back a step? I mean, just picking up on what both John, Bob and Claire mentioned, I think I really welcome this industry seal of approval. It's the only way of creating a level playing field. We're currently going down the B Corp certification route. I know Matt and Whitecroft have gone down the cradle to cradle. They're all great, but I think as an industry, we need our own. Basically, need our own set, and that's what I would really welcome.
Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, don't forget, just put your hand up if you want to get in on this.
I don't know if I've answered your question there, Ray. Sorry.
I'm not sure you have. It's yes. I mean, you know, low value items. You know, you do see high value luminaires, highly engineered. They'll end up on eBay maybe if you're lucky, and you know they get back into the waste stream that way. But as you say, you know, unless somebody is there to take them out of a ceiling, retool them, clean them, recommission them, rewire them, pat test them, sell them, you know, there's a lot of steps in that.
Yes, but do you remember when the government was saying that, you know, they were going to have low carbon houses by 2020, except the fact they were ignoring that 99% of all houses in 2020 had already been built when they made the announcement. So the big pile of fittings that we need to address are already out there. So we need to get in. What we need to invent is how to do it. We understand how to get a fitting from the far side of the world to a top shop in Tunbridge. We need to invent the reverse logistics to go and pick it up again. And that's where we need to go to. Matt is great. You know, he's building partnerships with clients. That he's looking after the future. We've got to try and understand the now of you know, the big amount of fittings already installed and what are we going to do about those. You know, the famous joke is, how many people does it take to change a light bulb? You know, how many politicians does it take to change a light bulb? 2, one to change it and one to change it back again. Now, it won't be long before Gen Z people don't get that joke because they've never changed a light bulb. But it used to be, we all used to understand, you put your hand up, take the fluorescent tube out, we can do that. And that builds local jobs. You know, people turning up in vans, it builds jobs for electrical contractors, it builds, you know, for refurbishment. This creates business. And to quote like Amazon and Jeff Bezos, you have to make it ubiquitous. You mean just like we have a market for secondhand office furniture, secondhand cars, or the poster child for refurbishment, which is photocopiers. You know, they're constantly being remanufactured. Why not lighting? Now, we can do it at Chris's level. We can, you know, Seren's doing it at the downlight level. You know, maybe the big one is the famous 600 by 600 flat panel. If it's glued together and made of multiple different types of plastics, we got a problem. But then Matt's dealing with the future of that. But yeah, it just takes a little bit of ingenuity, but we need to make it into a business case.
Hey guys, yeah, so yeah, fully agree with what you're saying there, Bob. And I guess just picking up on the now, a couple of things here. So I'd love to, let's just debunk this whole, it's difficult in the real world to do this. It's not at all. You know, we're up to 15 projects and counting. And you know, as Chris alluded to, if you take a project, you do different things. So the last one we worked on, the downlights, we replaced with new downlights, but we kept the ceiling tiles and rapid prototyped a new bezel to use the existing ceiling structure. The bulkheads, we did a new gear tray too, but we kept the substructure of the product there. So you amend what you're doing. We bring the products back here, we re-warranty them and put them back out there. We've got a specials team on site. We've been doing this with modifying our products to suit ceiling tiles for years. It's not difficult. So I'd like to kill that one. Anyone who says it's too difficult, come and talk to me or Whitecroft Lighting. Yeah, we'll show you the way. But then secondly, Claire's point there, this zero VAT thing, I think is absolutely perfect. And for me, it taps into a bigger issue here. I meet many pioneers, many people who their values and beliefs are aligned with what we're trying to do. They're doing this because of corporate social responsibility, because they want to do the right thing. Whereas if you've got a mechanism like there's no VAT on a project if you upcycle it, that's fantastic, because we're starting to get those guys in the middle ground who are a little bit unsure about doing it. You're giving them a nudge, you're giving them an incentive to start going. That's the thing, Claire. I think it's genius. That's the thing that we need. Something from above that's dragging this along.
Just a quick one. I'll come to you, Chris. Chris, you charge normal 20% VAT, I presume, on your reconditioned.
Yeah, we do. So there's no financial assistance on that side. I think just picking up on what Matt said there, I think ultimately there needs to be a move. What is value? It's currently measured. It's the capital cost and the energy saving, but this is a much bigger picture. So I think, yes, the reduction in, if it is 0% on the VAT, that's great, because again, that financially incentivizes the purchase. But we need to move away from those decisions which are purely based on energy consumption and capital cost. We need to be looking at other areas as well. This is very faceted.
Okay, back to you, John. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that we're only at the start of this process. And in terms of the fittings that are going to be taken out of ceilings and taken off walls, there will be a fairly decent proportion of those that we can do nothing with, because they were designed and built in such a way that you can do nothing with them. So we're starting from the point of we do what we can, but as we move forward, the design of products change, the accessibility into a product changes, the attitude towards availability of spare parts improves, and we see ourselves moving forward in that way. So, Chris, go on.
Yeah, just picking up on that piece from John, I think it's interesting with what we do, because we purely salvage and restore pieces between the 1920s and 1970s, and there's this no man's land between 1970 and wherever we are on that scale, where the terms value engineering, planned obsolescence came into the vocabulary. We struggle to restore products after a certain point, because the emergence of plastics floods the market. It's an unproven technology, and they just can't be dealt with. So we do have this big chunk of products. I'm not disagreeing with what Matt's just said. I think everything is achievable, but we do have this legacy problem from the 1970s through to a certain point, which is problematic.
But surely today we need to start over-engineering products, so they're going to have a second life. They need to be better engineered.
A lot of the stuff we do is massively over-engineered because they were made in that period. But they don't have to be over-engineered. They just have to be well-engineered and considered, which is exactly what, again, going back to what Matt's doing. It's just there's a systemic change required, I think, from education level right the way through, on what we actually teaching designers in schools and at universities on this as well.
John,
just a quickie. The LED introduced over-engineering into luminaires. Luminaires got twice as heavy as soon as we put an LED into them, because we needed to have heat sinks. So there's more material in use already. There's more robustness in an LED fitting than we ever had in a dichroic halogen or in a folded up box with 4 18-watt T8s in them. So we're already somewhere down the line to say, well, one of the reasons there is residual value in an old light fitting is that in some of these cases, you can drive a tank over them. They're already built to last. It's not the fitting that's failing, it's the source and the electronics.
Okay, let's take a couple of questions and comments that are coming in. Sophie Parry is saying, if the original manufacturer carries out a refurbishment, how do they know if there are any banned substances as per the RoHS, the restriction of hazardous substances, being carried forward into the refurbished luminaire? And on the second point, Carl Mobley, I hope I pronounced your name right, Carl, is he says manufacturers lose contact with their fittings. If they are forced to keep in contact with their luminaires, this could work. They are the only ones who know what has gone into their luminaire in the first place, so they are best placed to know how to reuse it. Matt.
I'll pick up on the second point, because it's something we're trying to deal with and grapple with ourselves at the moment. All of our new Vitality products are QR coded and tagged, basically asset tagged. And effectively what you can do there is we've embedded material passports. So we use a third-party website. You can scan this item and it comes back to our website or this other website if we no longer exist as an entity. And it gives you a full breakdown of how the product was made, where it came from, the parts that are in it and how you manufacture them and deal with them. I think that side of things is relatively easy to do. What we're trying to look at now is when you go down a level. So as John rightly points out, the product is built to last, right? The carcass, I think, will be there for a while. The LED boards and the driver, they're the two things that innately are going to go pop. So we're now talking with the driver guys, the big players and some of the smaller players in the UK. And we're also looking at the design of boards to see if we can embed RFID or other technology to allow us to track it at the point of getting it back. So then we can understand, actually, this has been in use for X amount of hours. It came from Whitecroft. It goes back to Whitecroft, sort of thing. So yeah, there are mechanisms around us. And I think absolutely the point is, if we made it and we put it out there, we take responsibility for it. But then behind us, there is a whole group of people who need to do the same.
Okay. Did you want to come in, Bob? Sorry.
I'm going to bravely try and answer Sophie's point on Roche and Reach. She is actually part of our the team writing the SOL fact file, so she's good.
Okay.
I think the question is, if we let the fitting go to landfill, like Nigel's been discussing, then those banned materials have now gone into landfill. We've got a problem. If we retain the materials in a light fitting and it's safely screwed to your ceiling, I would suggest that they're in a reasonably safe environment. So, we might need to look at legislation, just as Claire's saying, that we can reduce VAT. If those materials stay in a light fitting, let's keep them there. Why is that a problem? We've actually now done the least bad thing. So, circular economy should always be doing good, not just doing less bad. But if we can lock them up, why not?
Okay. Sabrina Coventry, she's a project development manager at Targetti, is raising the issue of leasing light and lighting as a service. There are more discussions and questions from clients about leasing light, its feasibility and purpose. From the point of manufacturer, is this a matter of providing maintenance to sustain the lifespan of the luminaire? However, this does not actually fall under the responsibility of the manufacturer or of the client/maintenance contractor. So Matt, what are your thoughts on this whole, do you guys do lighting as a service, leasing? You're smiling.
I was going to say, do you want to get Claire to do the positive side of this before I get in there?
Okay, well, maybe. Okay, yes, let's do that. Claire, lighting as a service, leasing. So the luminaire maker has an ongoing responsibility in a relationship with the fittings that they've made.
Yes, that's a possibility. When we talk about the WEEE regulations, when we talk about waste electrical equipment, we've got to remember it's a producer responsibility piece of legislation. So producers it's trying to make producers responsible, either physically responsible for coming in and taking back their products and maybe reusing or recycling, but making sure the right thing happens, or paying somebody else to do that. But it's producer responsibility at the bottom. Now, one of the ways that's being suggested as part of the move towards circular economy is to encourage more leasing models, and not just for luminaires, but for absolutely everything, whether it's IT. If you think about the old BT phone system where you rented your phone, those phones went back to a factory in South Wales and they were all recycled. They didn't go to landfill at all because the producer could get hold of them. Whereas now it's very difficult to actually get control over a product once you've sold it. So you're relying really on the goodwill and the ethos of the person that's getting rid of it to follow his duty of care and to do the right thing. and particularly so with businesses. So that's why it's being put forward as an idea, though I know it's not a model that is to everyone's taste.
Okay, Matt, did you want to come back on that? Yeah.
Yeah, certainly not mine. Yeah, listen, no, I fully agree, Claire, and I think done correctly, it is the right thing to do. As in, certainly we've been leasing projects for years now, and it's a mechanism if you approach us we can deal with. But for me, fundamentally, I don't see the link between it and circularity, as in it's not driving anybody in the process to be circular. You know, you can lease a luminaire to someone, ignore it for 5 years, keep them on the line, and then pop in a less good luminaire or an equally rubbish luminaire at a later point in time, as long as the lights stay on. I'd rather see it linked to, and Chris alluded to this, you know, we're using cradle to cradle or any independent accreditation of the luminaire in the first place. So I guess what I'm saying to you is, I think it's interesting, but it's just a model of procurement. It doesn't drive for me circularity in its entirety.
John?
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that we really need in this is that we are going to need some kind of accreditation system, certification system. At some point, Nigel won't have any work to do because we won't be recycling any lamps anymore. So he's looking for a new project. Well, here it is. This is the one that says, just like your local garage who can issue MOT certificates, the people who are doing that work have to be certified. They have to know what they're doing, and there has to be an independent assessment made of the work they do. So if we want companies, these companies that are going to be made up of electricians, wholesalers, manufacturers, all coming together and creating a new business on the high street, they're going to have certification for that to work, in order that all of those things like materials, like pack testing, that we know that the fittings that are going out back into the commercial sector, after all, are all safe to use.
Bob?
And that, you know, that picks up another one. Just as you go onto the used car lot, you know what the car does, you know what its performance is, you know, you can look on the mileage, you know, mileometer to see how many miles it's traveled. You get an idea what you're going to get. We then get into systems where we need to know photometry. You take some fittings out the ceiling. What were they designed to do? Where do we get the photometry from? We then obviously we need system. How long has the LED's been burning? How old is the driver? Etc. 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 So yes, we need that knowledge. Maybe warranties have got to change as well. So if that warranty on that Cat A fit out only went to the first purchaser, so what, 6 months later they've walked away, they're going to get ripped out, there's now no longer a warranty. There's all sorts of things we can start looking at to enable this.
Okay, I'll take a few more comments from attendees. Jim Shove is saying, based on the figures that Nigel gave about the tonnage recycled against what was shipped, there needs to be a carrot and stick approach. Otherwise, sadly, things will only continue as they are now. Kevin Shaw says we need more information from manufacturers on the design life of fittings, particularly on plastics materials, so that we can use design solutions, keeping existing fittings in place. We should have information to assess LED outputs in longer terms, so we know as designers what we can keep in the ceiling. James Poor is saying specifically on taking luminaires out of ceilings, we need to change the contractor culture as well. There is a time or timing issue here as well. When our clients carry out a retail refurb, it's all down to time. Our client will drive for the design and specification, then wait right up to the 11th hour until all the ducks are in a row and the optimum time for shutting down the project and ripping out the old interior. The contractors will steam in and rip everything out in a couple of hours and just be focused on getting the waste, in inverted commas, off site and away as soon as possible to enable the fit out to take place. Maybe a reward or penalty to engender responsibility.
Right. Oh, sorry.
Nigel.
On that, I think James is absolutely right that one of the fundamental problems is the speed of dragging out the waste fittings. And actually, if they're pulled out really quickly, then probably the likelihood of being able to reuse them in the future is significantly diminished. And it does strike me, we've looked at a number of different segments of this problem. Chris is looking at the pre-70s fittings. Clearly, there's value in there. They're elegant. They've got inherent value in the way they were designed and built. Matt is looking also at growing opportunities to reused product in situ, and so the owner of the fitting is saying, yes, I'd like to get it reused and upgraded. What can we do about it? I think that's a fantastic model, and I really hope that will grow. The hardest part of this piece, though, is those where they've taken a decision that they want to change them. They're being pulled out often very quickly, as James has said, and they're either going into a scrap metal container, or they may be going into one of our containers. But at that point, it seems to be a lot more challenging to get reuse. One of the things that we're doing now is whenever we have a new project and we are told that there's a large number of fittings to be taken out, we're asking, do you think, in your opinion, to the waste holder or the contractor, that these might be capable of being reused? And we're then trying to make connections with organizations that might be capable of reusing those and repurposing those, and seeing if we can start to make it more circular. We haven't been successful yet, but we're starting down that process. We'd love to hear from any companies who might be able to help us on that journey.
Okay. Yeah, Claire.
I just wanted to add on that another idea to promote reuse, not just now in luminaires, but more widely in electrical equipment, is to try and get everything assessed, at least assess it, because at the moment, the way it's collected, a very, very small proportion is ever really assessed for reuse. And by the time it is, it's usually damaged. So I absolutely echo what Nigel said. That's a really important step. Get someone to look at it.
Matt. Yeah.
Stepping on that one, I think just Chris mentioned this earlier, so I want to pick up on a little bit. We're talking now about our next gen, our second gen circular products. And one of the things we've tasked our product development team here at Whitecroft is we've said to them, design the product that we want, the luminaire, but then go and design the product to be something else from day one. So can you build into the design process? So this is graduates, designers and people, professionals in this field. Think about the product not just being a luminaire, but what can it be at the end of its life as well? And I think just picking up on that point Chris was making, it is a wider step change to everything. We've got to start thinking about the way we treat, the way we train our designers, but also the way we think about a luminaire, moving forward. So there is some interesting stuff going on around that.
Okay, Carol Mobley is saying no one is going to a project to recycle 20 downlights. You can purchase 20 new ones for a fraction of the cost. It's as we move forward, it will get better. Bob.
Well, there's two problems there. One is there's fraction of the financial cost. We're not accounting for the environmental cost. And that's when you led off this introduction, all the people here on this panel who are passionate environmentalists, and maybe our time has come. The other question is end of life. So we're talking about, we started off the Top Shop analogy, but what if you do have 20, wall lights, one of them fails? Well, at the moment, because John correctly on an earlier Recolight webinar said, well, we can't get spare parts. And we know you might not be able to get the bin of LEDs, but a bit of cleverness, if you can retrieve one of those, put in a new LED engine, you've just fixed one fitting and all 20 stay screwed on the wall. So there is a repair industry as well. So, understanding what we're going to do, saving that work is useful.
Ray, do you mind if I come back on an earlier question that is right at the top of the list from Gary Thornton, because he's mentioning the Relit initiative from Mike Grubb.
Do you want to explain what the Relit is, John, before we...
I do, because I'm working on one as we speak. Yeah, this started, this came out of the Michael Grubb studio, Mike's down in Bournemouth, for those who don't know, and he was approached by someone who had a social project, which is basically a project with no money in it, for people who won't earn any money out of it, and there must be some way we can light this. Mike and the team sat down, scratched their heads, and realized that every lighting designer has got a cupboard full of old light fittings. Manufacturers have got samples. There's stuff on shelves that will never be sold because it's gone out of range. So they rang around and said, can you help us? Can you help us? Can you help us? And if you remember, they won a design award, a Lux award, for exactly that thing. So I'm working on a project down in Poole, just down the road from Bournemouth, and I'm doing this with Mike's blessing, which is a homeless resource centre. And again, we're all working pro bono, and so we went out to the marketplace to see what light fittings we could get, and the response has been absolutely fantastic, and it's going to look an absolute treat when it's finished in the new year. But it's also raised one or two issues around this whole thing about end-of-life luminaires that have no value. That what we said to manufacturers is, you must have some old tat out there that you can't sell, and you don't really want to junk it. Can we have it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. But we've also got a situation where fittings appear. I've had a conversation with a manufacturer who tells me that he's got 400 light fittings on his shelves. They have been paid for and they were bespoke, and the project has been pulled. So before he puts them in the skip, have we got a home for them? And that is much more, I think. I think the real initiative is a social initiative, and I think we just keep pushing that one. But the idea that by raising that question, we've got something where a manufacturer say they're not worth anything to me because I've already got the money for them. But they're not exact. I mean, they are just commodity style fittings, but they've never been used. So whoever takes those on is going to take them on to sell them. So the manufacturer is doing what? Is handing over 400 light fittings for no money so that somebody else can make money out of them? Or is the residual value sitting with the original manufacturer in order that then the person who's going to repurpose them will be paying some kind of money, and they will still be making a profit? It's another one of those models. Reglit is something very, 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 very specific and may continue. But we've got to remember that whatever we do has got to be a commercial model.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a way of getting fittings from place A, which might be a manufacturer's shelves, it might be a shop, it might be somebody nicking them out the skip on a Friday night, and they've got then to have added value before they go back into the marketplace. We mustn't forget that one.
Somebody's got to make money along the way.
Yeah.
Alan Tullett is saying, I think the solution is more likely to come from a change of attitude rather than legislation. It used to be acceptable to drink and drive or chain smoke. I think the future lies in people not thinking it's okay to dump a perfectly usable luminaire just because it is no longer wanted or for reasons of fashion. Bob.
Yeah, and that, do you remember like background? How if you're going to go buy a new car now, you wouldn't buy a car without a decent Euro NCAT rating, even though it's not the law. So the intent for, if we get this right on the assessment method, Christina Allison came up with a great method of doing it. We go from 0, which is standard, no circular economy factors, and then we go +1, +2, +3, up to +4, which is the hero. That's where you're truly regenerative. What we want it to specify, start saying, I'm not going to specify anything which is not a +3 or +2, or we make it normal, we make it ubiquitous. And when they rip out that top shop, they might be in a hurry, but you know what, there's somebody there with a load of jiffy bags and some plastic crates, and they can quickly take it off the track, pop it in a plastic bag, don't scratch it, and then it has life. Really, it's not difficult. It's just, trouble is, it's just not done because they don't care or because there wasn't any value put on that. But really, a lot of this could be done very, very easily. And it should be wrong to throw a fitting in the skip without thinking about it. Just like people don't smoke anymore or they don't drink and drive. Let's discuss. That's how, the past is a different country. They did things differently there.
Can we talk about the role of regulations? Excuse me, Alan talked about legislation. Simon Fisher is asking, saying what regulations are mandating this to happen? Lighting Europe discussed the eco-design regulations. When will these come into force? Our children and our children's children are likely to have a very different view of the world, but now too few of us won't do anything unless we are forced to do it. And I see Oriana Georgiou-Saku has just clarified that the eco-design regulations come in the 1st September next year. But obviously coming down the line, they're looking at making the eco-design regulations more emphasis on circularity. Claire, what do you see in the regulatory frame? Can we use the stick element to make this happen, and so that luminaires get reused?
I think in the long term, there is a stick or a carrot with the regulations in terms of the product that we're going to be taking down in 10 or 20 years' time, or maybe 5. But the product that's there now, I don't think the eco-design regulations are going to help with at all. For that, we've got to look at the WEEE regulations and how they can encourage, incentivize reuse, recyclability. Sometimes by saying, look, you can't do this. You can't just put it in a skip. You've got to have a registered waste contractor. It's got to go to the right place. Or by giving incentives such as no VAT on reuse, which, by the way, is an idea which DEFRA is looking at, but the Treasury has the big stick in that respect, and so we may not actually see that. But coming up with these ideas to make it, to create carrots, if you like. So I see eco-design as really important longer term. That's the future. The present is the WEEE regulations, and what do we do with the stuff we've got now? Nigel,
did you want to? You'd echo that, I presume.
I would. I think Claire's put it very well there. You know, it really is. There are plans to change the legislation. The government has committed to putting more circular economy approaches into law by 2023, 2024. And those might mean things like a reduction in your WEEE fees if you do the right thing by designing new products. It might mean no WEEE fees if you collect, take your fair share of responsibility in terms of collecting your own waste or the waste that arises and use it again within your factory. So there may be incentives built in within the WEEE regulations to start to encourage people to do more things in a more circular fashion. But we'll have to wait and see at least until the end of next year before we know what it might look like.
Okay, a few more comments. Steph Piesel, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, is saying that it needs to start with education so that all of this becomes second nature. Matthias Carlson is saying, to build on Chris's point of standards, is there not a risk that any lighting only standard would be essentially controlled by the big manufacturers to suit particular needs? Wonder who they're thinking about there. Independent standards on higher levels, electronics for instance, seem to be the only reasonable route. Anybody want to come in on that?
I think that framework is not just defined by manufacturers, because of course we know what will happen there. It needs to be across many levels. The specifiers need to be, the designers need to be involved with this process as well. So yeah.
And
yeah, go on. Sorry,
it doesn't just have to be lighting. I think often in lighting with the pioneers, we often think things which haven't yet been thought, but we could do this the whole of building services. I don't know what's going on with air conditioning units, or why not? There must be huge amounts of other similar areas that we could deal with.
Do we know what's happening in these other fields, Claire? Do we, in terms of H&V and plumbing and all the rest of it? What happens to all of that stuff?
Well, there is a standard, interestingly, called PAS 141, which was developed probably 10 or 15 years ago to give confidence in refurbished equipment, that it had gone through proper people, however they were defined, people who knew what PAP testing was, etc. And so there was a standard, there still is, but the whole of the reuse area has not taken off as it should have. And I think you're right. Lighting could lead the way here, and the pressure is building, and it's building in the regulations, in eco-design regulations, in the WEEE regulations. It's building, but I think you do need a standard, and you could lead the way.
Okay. Did you want to get in? Who wants to get in that, Matt?
Yeah, just I agree completely. I think I'm torn with legislation, right? I want it to drive people to be more circular, but then I don't want to get bogged down in in the quagmire of trying to do one thing one way. But interesting work at the moment, picking up on what Chris was saying there with BSI, And one of the things they're looking at is a kite mark for regen or upcycling. But specifically, they're not saying stick it on the product, they're saying stick it on the process. So they're saying to us, come on, guys, take us through what you do. You know, this point Bob was making, we take a product back, we photometer it, we work out what it used to do. We go through the process of the PAP testing, the electrical testing, we put it back on the market with a warranty. So they want to kite mark the process from start to finish, not the product. And I think it's that sort of movement that's generic enough for people to go and slap something on their spec and say, do that, please, I want more of that.
Okay. Tom Riddell, who's the circular design engineer at EGG or EGG Lighting, is saying, what methods or tests can we use or can we develop to determine the remaining lifetime of key components to assist with the reuse and refurbishment? Anybody feel confident to take that? Nigel, is that one for you?
I think I'd struggle to answer that one. I'm very
Oh,
happily.
okay. Well then, okay. All right. Back at you
Chris.
then, Matt. Back at you, Matt. Then come on.
Hey, listen, we're starting out on this journey, and I'm learning all the time. But one of the things we're starting to do now is, so just to push it back at people, we're saying with a lot of lighting designers now and a lot of architects, we're saying, what is the life of your application? Right. Let's start with the basis of that. Then we'll build from there, and then we can start targeting the plastics. But again, for me, I'm intrigued by. I've sat by and watched the IoT for the last 5 or 10 years, and everyone, rant wildly about how great this is going to be and change our lives. Interestingly, I think the IoT will turn back on itself, as in now I want sensors embedded in our products so we can start getting data back. It's going to become more important for me to know burning hours, temperature, what's flipped, what's been surged. So I think tech has its part to play here. We need to start tagging components and thinking about where they've been and what they do, and then in real time get data back.
Okay. All right. Okay, right. Before I'm conscious that we're past the top of the hour, but I tell you what, a way we could wrap up is look at, what is the next baby step? What is the next sort of action that we can do? What would you like to see happen next before we can begin to, a journey of 1,000 footsteps begin with the first step, doesn't it? So I'm going to go to you, John. What do you want to happen next, so we can begin to address this?
Yes, I think that journey of 1,000 steps needs a map. I think, Mr. Maloney. Okay. So we need the map. We need to know where we need to go and how we can get there. So rather than wait for somebody who's going, I've just lost my job, what am I going to do? I tell you what, I'm going to rejuvenate some old light fittings, and I'm just going to hope I get it right. Let's have the map already there for them to show what it means. And out from that map will come things like BSI kite marks, and will come things like accreditation systems. But without the map, we ain't got nowhere to go.
Same question to you, Claire. You're queen of the world for a day, and you could do anything. What would you like to see happen to begin to address all this waste?
I'd like to see everything assessed for reuse before a decision is made about what to do with it. And I think to encourage that, people to think about it is the first step.
And that would be legislation you're talking about.
I'm hoping that it will be reflected in legislation in some way. That's the discussions that are going on. And until it is, because as Nigel said, we're going to have to wait a couple of years for that to actually come to pass. Let's get the culture started of assessing for reuse, of thinking every time, and promote it wherever we can.
Okay. To you, Chris.
I'd like a level playing field with well-engineered products that are built to last or built to be adapted. I firmly believe the onus for change is with the manufacturer or the supplier, but the opportunity for delivering that is with the specifier. And I've been heartened over the last 12 to 18 months working with Michael Grubb's a good example, and we worked with them on Lush. And the client was very much driving what happens to these fixtures at the end of this project when we don't want them in 3 years' time. And it was really encouraging to have those conversations. And I just want to keep those conversations going.
Good. Matt, as a manufacturer, what's your view?
I'd say to the specification community out there, help me to help you. Stop asking me for EPDs. I don't know what you're going to do with the data. Start thinking beyond carbon and start asking for independent accreditation. I don't care whether it's B Corp, like Chris was talking about, or cradle to cradle. Just think bigger, guys.
Okay, that's quite a challenge to the trade. Bob?
Well, first, I'd like to thank Nigel and Suzanne and you for getting these baby steps. So we're creating the debate. I think hopefully what we're doing next baby step is what John asked for, that map, you know, where we're beginning to write down what you need to understand, what you need to know, what you can do. And that drives platforms and business. And then we feed that out and everybody comments back and we do another one and another one and another one, and it gets better. So it's knowledge and it's action and it's attitudes.
And finally, same question to you, Nigel. How do we move this forward? What is the next step that has to happen?
For us, the next baby step, I'd love to hear from any organisations who feel they can take some of the end of first life fittings that we are collecting in their tens of thousands and can find a way of extracting value from them, either by parts harvesting or refurbishing them for resale, so that they are not being recycled, and so we're not losing all that value, all that embedded carbon, and we are starting to build a more circular economy in lighting.
Okay. Well, I think we're in the foothills. We're taking the baby steps, whatever metaphor you want to use. We're at the initial period. Suzanne has asked me to ask everyone. We're going to in the new year, we're going to drill into some of these areas in more detail, do a deeper dive. If there's any area specifically that you think we could look at in terms of this whole area of moving towards a circular economy, please send us your thoughts and your suggestions for topics, and we can drill into this and then we can host the conversation. The more things are rumbling and starting to move in the market, and hopefully, we're going to be living in a very different world. Will begin in 2021. It only remains to keep an eye out on, as I say, on the Recolight website, recolight.co.uk, and all the usual channels for future events of this ilk. This event has been recorded, and you'll get a link to that, which you can share in the next hour or so on email. So thank you for that. It just remains me to thank our lineup of our diverse and stellar panel, Chris, John, Claire, Matt, Bob and Nigel, and thank you to Recolight for hosting this and for putting this topic on the agenda this year. Thank you all, guys, and look forward to our next one.
Thank you, Ray.
Cheers, guys.
That's right.
Thanks.